Welcome to the Nashville Money Guys podcast. We still do not have an intro. This is Brandon Rumbley, Brandon McDonald, and Jason Dodge with the Nashville Money Guys. We are a hard money lending company out of Nashville, Tennessee. And today we are going to talk about one kind of major challenge that we have had throughout our entire career as real estate investors, which started together in 2009. So Brandon Rumbley, I'll let you take it away with kind of what we're going to get into it.
Yep. So the issue is cash flow. And so people ask successful real estate investors all the time, like, hey, if you had to start over, what would you do? And kind of my patent answer that I give people is I would do deals that actually produced cash flow to meet my monthly nut, whatever that is, and do enough of those deals to where I knew I had enough money coming in to start and didn't have to worry about making my monthly nut.
Yeah, define cash flow.
Cash flow is income from assets minus expenses. So if it's a rental property, then it's income that comes in. So the rents you get minus your expenses, which are your mortgage payment, vacancy, maintenance, property taxes, etc. And whatever's left over is the cash flow that you get.
So like the 1% rule, right? Really high cash flowing.
Yeah. So the 1% rule is whatever you're into the property for. So let's say you buy a property for $200,000, then the 1% rule says you need to make at least $2,000 a month, which is 1%, in rent to be able to afford that property. And in reality, the 1% rule means you will get no cash flow by the time you actually parse out the numbers.
I was talking to another investor gal a couple of weeks ago, and she was explaining to me that she was positive cash flow. And then we started going through the numbers, and she wasn't taking out vacancy, and she was taking out very little for maintenance. Like $50 a month was what her estimate for maintenance was. And I asked her what she had spent the last 3 years. And she had replaced the water heater 1 year, the roof 1 year, and the HVAC 1 year. And I was like, okay, so maybe it's 50 now, but like how long is it going to take you to recoup back on that maintenance? It was nasty.
We generally, a lot of the calculators that I've seen and developed, we account about 10% vacancy and then again, 10% maintenance. And then whatever your management fee is.
If you lie to yourself about cash flow, like all it's doing, you can maintain probably for a while, but it's just going to feel like garbage. And that's what you're like, that's why we're talking about this.
And we experienced that garbage for several years over the course of our career because we had a lot of assets and we were house rich and cash poor. So there's a strategy using a wrap mortgage that I think I would, if I had to start over, I would start using that strategy. So effectively you would do something like negotiate an owner finance deal on, let's say it's $100,000 house, and you can convince the seller to take a 3% interest rate and carry that financing for you. You could buy that house, take the 3% rate, which in today's market is a killer rate, rent it out, and probably cash flow that deal. However, you could sell that same house to another owner occupant, and in today's market, they're probably willing to pay 9% on that same house, and you could get a higher price for it. So you're buying it for $100, you're paying 3% interest rate, which is $3,000 in interest a year, and then you're able to sell it for $150 at a 9% interest rate, which is right at $14,000 a year roughly. So you're bringing in $14,000 from your buyer, and you're paying $3,000. So now you've made $11,000 on that deal annually, and will continue to make that moving forward as long as they don't refinance you out.
Yeah, it's those types of strategies are something when you're talking to a new person where they're like, wait, what? Like, do that again. So
that sounds illegal.
That's always a fun one. If like going to real estate education classes is one of those things that has empowered Brandon to talk that way. So like Pete Fortunato is one of the guys that we've listened to, Bill Cook, Vina Jones Cox. Mm-hmm. Who else do you like that anybody else that's doing like creative financing like that?
John Schaub,
yeah.
Gary Johnston.
Yeah, anyone that runs in that circle we like is for the creative.
Because it's like,
yeah,
it's not expensive education. You're
Yeah.
not paying 25 grand to go get it, but it took a long time, especially for me. I think I'm the slower one on the team to grasp those types of concepts. You just have to keep showing up, but we just kept showing up and then building not only a network of people that we were really enjoying, but then the information actually starts sinking in and you see different strategies and ways to create cash flow out of a deal that, traditionally somebody would just burr that deal.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
But even just understanding that that is a possibility, like until someone said, hey, you could do this, I would have never thought that that was even a possibility. But now you're watching this podcast and you're like, okay, I got to research what a wrap mortgage is. But the math is relatively simple on that deal. Logistically, there's some paperwork you got to put in place, and like you need to hire the right people to make sure you do it well. But if I'm selling a house to McDonald and he's going to pay me $3,000 a year in interest to do that, and he sells it to Jason, and Jason is going to pay him $14,000 a year, you can see how he's making a
That's
spread
more
on
money.
that.
Yeah.
So you
I
do
wanna buy
that,
it from
and then if you need to make $5,000 a month in income to actually cover your expenses, then okay, you got to go do, what was that, 1,100 in spread, and that's probably a better than average wrap deal. But if you can do 800 times 5 or 6 deals, then all of a sudden you're at your $5,000 a month.
I can hear people like, you can't find $100,000 deals in my market. So when you and I went out last week, we were in a more rural area of Tennessee, and there were houses all over the place that would have fit that model, but they were an hour and a half outside of Nashville. But that's fine. Like, because of the type of structure, you're not actually managing the unit. Or it's like, no, I'm going to do 5 of these, so this is worth it because I'm going to try to get a little pocket of these in a rural area, which I think that's something that I've kind of developed on as well. Initially, when we started, I would say don't do things that are more than 30 minutes from where you live, because you want to be able to keep an eye on it and you want to manage. And now my kind of renewed thinking is, if you learn how to manage properties that are an hour and a half away and you can do it properly by putting the right people in place and learning how to hire, you can scale and you can get better at the actual business side of flipping or buying rentals or anything like that.
And you eliminate competition. Like there's a lot of investors who want to buy real estate in Nashville, Tennessee.
it's very easy to say don't buy deals if it's more than 30 minutes when everything in 2008 is a deal.
Yeah,
So,
that's true.
But the number of investors wanting to buy in Bucksnort, Tennessee,
yeah.
which is an actual place, there are a lot fewer of them. So if you're willing to do a deal in Bucksnort, then you're not going to have much competition versus a place like Nashville.
That's like almost every major city in the U.S. has a Bucksnort, Tennessee. That's probably an hour and a half outside of it. Like maybe California, you run into some issues there, but I don't know. It does seem like 95% of the U.S. you could do it. All right. So you talked about what you would do if you had to start over again. What I want to dive into a little bit more, like Dodge, I think I don't have a great answer for that on my end because I want different things out of it. Like,
Sure.
do you have an answer for what you would do if you had to start over again?
I mean, I think if I had to start over again, I wouldn't do too much differently other than just buy more. Trust the market, trust the process, not be afraid, and buy cash flowing deals, just continue that, but do more of it.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, back in the day, we would walk away from deals, that were on the edge because we're like, well, there's other deals out there. And that on the edge, I mean, a couple $1,000s, as far as the purchase price, which translates to the payment difference of not very much, so overall, if we had just bought those deals that were close enough, like we probably would be in a much better spot.
We also were able to buy a whole bunch of deals that were 2 and 3% deals. And you can still find those today, but you got to go to Bucksnort. You're not going to find them in Nashville.
Yeah. Those ratios are insane. But like what you're talking about, the reason we created pain for ourselves was not only were we were walking away from certain deals, but the deals that we were getting into, we were willing to take some of our cash that we had made and put them into each of those deals.
Yep.
We probably weren't borrowing enough money.
Yeah.
on every single one. So that when you start to scale, it starts to get really restrictive really quickly.
Yeah. And we were all holding our lifestyle real low, keeping our lifestyle payments pretty low. And then, you know, you can do that for so long until you feel like you're in handcuffs, and you see all these properties that you've got out here and you have this lifestyle this way. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, I should be able to do this. And we all kind of did this at the same time where it goes like this, like that, and then it just goes like that. And that is hard when you're not able to increase the cash flow that quickly.
Yeah.
So
Paper millionaire kind of sucks. Like, yeah, being a paper millionaire, it feels fun to say, but if you don't have the cash flow, like a monthly income that kind of matches it up, then it doesn't feel super awesome.
Yeah. And, one of your sayings over the last year or two has been the Coke machine. Like you pull one off the front, sell it, and then you refill the back. But at this point in Nashville, like that's nearly impossible with interest rates. So it's like, how do you, had we been doing that back then, it would have been fine. Like we just keep churning and rebuying and all that. But
what we're talking about is basically creating, like buy a rental a few years ago and rehab it so that you've got equity, let it pay down a little bit, and that rental gets moved forward in the Coke machine. So there's some actual liquid that you can sell that thing, and then everybody gets a paycheck, but you're replacing units at the back of the Coke machine, allowing time to amortize those properties down and allowing the values to go up. But it is a different market right now.
It's hard, yeah.
Like we're shifting stuff around and we're moving stuff, but because we're trying to super fund Nashville Money Guys, our hard money lending company based out of Nashville, Tennessee. If you need hard money, hit us up, NashvilleMoneyGuys.com. Because we view that as a lucrative play that fits our lifestyles right now. Mm-hmm. So we're Coke bottling essentially, but it's been a really long delayed Coke bottle. Yeah. And we're sitting in this badass house right now that is 15 years in the making, essentially.
Yeah.
If we could have managed everything better, maybe this house could have been done 5 years ago, Yeah. I'll enjoy the art of what we've done. I enjoy like the new builds that I got to help design and all those kinds of things. I think what I would have done is I would have focused more in the beginning on immediately learning how to basically run a business better. What we did a good job was basically creating jobs for ourselves. Mm-hmm. And if we would have learned how to actually run a business and then actually just committed to that and said, we are going to be defining job roles and hiring people and putting them in place, then I could have stayed in a lane that I really enjoyed and thrived in. And so could you have, and so could you have. But instead, what we did was created these jobs that we all kind of have parts that we suck at. And so they don't get done as well as they should. Mm-hmm. Now, we've been successful in spite of that. And
but our business has sort of been whack-a-mole. We created an environment where things popped up and we were like, oh yeah, we're going to hit that. And then something else would pop up. Oh yeah, we're going to hit that. And we scored pretty well at the end of the game. But if we had a better strategy, a bigger hammer or a better hammer or more people or whatever, we could have,
I like
how's
the
that for a
idea
metaphor?
I really like it. You're the one rolling the metaphors the last couple of times, not me. I like the idea of one person watching each hole. So when that mole pops up, it's boop, this is my hole that I focus on. I think that we would have been able to scale more and safely.
Yeah.
Because if we would have literally focused on hiring a bookkeeper first, hiring an assistant for everybody second, and then really defining our roles and what we were good at, I think through 2010, 11, 12, 13, we would have just bought. We would have focused on borrowing more money. We would have focused on borrowing the holding costs that are included in that. We would have probably taken more money home on our end.
Yep.
And been a little bit more comfortable.
The one thing you do have to be careful of is if you're doing both rentals and rehabs, the rehabs are cash stealers. They're hungry. They will eat up your cash. So pulling from the rentals, which you want to designate as your monthly nut or income, it's very easy to be like, oh, we're over budget over here and pull from there over to the rehab. So
I don't know anybody that hasn't gone over budget and robbed Peter to pay Paul.
Yeah.
but like if you do it continually and you scale inappropriately, it will literally accidentally bankrupt you.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about is going over like $10,000, just going over budget 10K, 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 10K. And all of a sudden you've got 7 houses and you're $70,000 over budget. And then how do you find that? Like we've been able to basically use cash because we had retained so much cash to get ourselves out of some super sticky situations.
Yep.
But if you didn't have a choice but to borrow, what do? Go put a second mortgage on something and just pray that you get a really dumb investor that's willing to loan 100% in second? Ugh.
Yeah. Or you just pray that you get saved by the market, which is what we've seen over the last several years. Is you've had a lot of, I call them hobby investors. So they watch HGTV and decide they're going to go flip houses and don't actually take the time to learn how to do that well on the front end, which is another thing we should have done earlier, is more education to actually learn how to do this well. But they've been okay because they bought a deal that was too skinny and they under budgeted and spent too much and should have lost money on the deal, but the market went up by 15% in that same year and they got saved, and at the end of the day felt like they did a pretty decent job and then went and did it again.
We had a buddy of ours who was listing his primary residence, and my wife's a realtor and went and looked at it, and she said, I think we should list at 375. And he said, okay, I got some stuff I want to button up on the house. And it wasn't much. And then 9 months later, he comes back and finally says, I got it done. And she looks at the market again and she was like, it's 450. Like, we're going to list at 450 now. And so just being undisciplined, being unfocused, but those days feel like they're over. Like at best, we feel like we're neutral right now.
For Nashville, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll go over this later, I'm assuming, in a different episode, but the actual numbers.
Yeah, and I want to start doing numbers probably, maybe not once a week, but like definitely a couple times a month going through. And I think it'll be really interesting to see what metrics we're actually looking at versus, what some other people are looking at.
Yeah.
All right. You got anything else to say? I think this was a pretty good one overall. Solid.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cash flow.
Cash flow. It's important. Figuring out how to manage it. It's definitely worth some time thinking about how to do it properly so that you're not just driving a red Honda Civic to bank meetings in 2016 wearing a suit. True story.
It's true.
Maybe not 2016, but not.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's true. Probably not 2016.
Our clown car.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Thanks for watching the Nashville Money Guys podcast. Brandon Rumbly, Brandon McDonald, Jason Dodge. If you're interested in hard money loans, check us out, NashvilleMoneyGuys.com. Thanks for watching.